There was a hush in the hall, a particular kind of stillness that only descends when something extraordinary is on the brink of unfolding. No one was looking down at their phones. No whispers, no coughs, not even the familiar shuffle of people adjusting their seats. Everyone was simply waiting. Two figures sat across from each other. On one side, a woman known around the world, celebrated for her beauty, her activism, her unyielding voice. And opposite her, a child, perhaps 10 years old, dressed plainly in a soft white hijab and a long, modest dress. Her hands rested quietly in her lap, her gaze steady, eyes that seemed to hold something timeless. The woman broke the silence. "You're 10, maybe even younger. Why wear that scarf?" The girl didn't flinch. She replied without pause, "Because it reminds me of who I truly am." That wasn't the answer the woman had expected. "And who are you?" "I'm someone who wants to be known for her words, not her appearance. I'm more than my skin or my hair. I am a soul, and a soul doesn't need decoration." There were a few quiet chuckles from the crowd, raised eyebrows. The woman offered a polite smile. "But do you really understand what it means? Or is it just something your parents told you to do?" The girl nodded slowly. "They taught me, yes, but never forced me. I saw my sister wearing it. She looked powerful, like a queen. And I thought, I want to be like that. Strong." "Strong," the woman echoed. "Yes," the girl said, "strong enough to resist what the world expects of me." The woman leaned forward slightly. "But doesn't the world want you to be free?" The girl's voice remained soft, serene. Freedom isn't always about revealing everything. Sometimes it's having the strength to conceal what is sacred. The world tells us to be bold, to be loud, to expose. But my faith teaches me to be dignified, pure, meaningful. I chose that path. "But don't you feel like you're missing out?" the woman asked gently. "Hair flowing in the breeze, sunlight on your skin, the freedom to dress as you like without being told what modesty means." The girl smiled. "I still dance, I still run, I still laugh until my belly aches. My hijab doesn't stop me from being myself. It stops others from defining who I should be." Her words were not delivered with pride or defiance, but with a deep peace, a calm certainty. "You speak like someone much older than you." "I read the Quran with my mother," the girl replied. "We read about Mary, Maryam, as we call her. She wore a scarf, too, yet no one called her oppressed." The woman's smile faded slightly. "That was thousands of years ago." "And we still remember her," the girl said, "not for her hair, but for her purity and her heart." A pause settled over the room. "But don't you think," the woman asked, her voice lower now, "that it sends the message that girls are responsible for how men behave, that they have to cover up because men can't control themselves?" The girl shook her head gently. "That's not what hijab means to me. My scarf isn't about fear, it's about worth. We protect what we value, not out of fear it'll be stolen, but because we know its preciousness." "But can't modesty exist without covering the head?" "Maybe, but for me, the hijab isn't just cloth. It's a symbol, a reminder, a daily commitment. Each morning when I tie it, I remind myself, I am enough. I don't need to reveal more to prove anything. And if someday you simply stop wanting to wear it, then I won't. But I don't see that day coming. I found something that makes me feel secure in a way words can't explain. Why would I give that up?" "But you're just a child." "I might be 10, yes, but some truths don't need time to settle. Some truths come early and stay forever." A soft gasp rippled through the audience. Stillness followed. She continued, My hijab doesn't limit me. It shields me from judgment, from fleeting trends, from the idea that my body defines my worth. The woman leaned back slightly. She was no longer listening to counter, but to understand. Where I come from, she said, girls are taught to show confidence, to walk tall, to own their beauty. Doesn't hiding it contradict that? I do walk tall, the girl replied. My scarf doesn't bend my spine. Confidence to me is not needing to impress anyone to be respected. But what about those who say hijab is oppression? They've never heard me speak, have they? A quiet beat passed. I wear it by choice, with love, with full awareness. That's not oppression. That's strength. The woman's tone softened. What would you say to girls who feel embarrassed about their faith? Who think covering up makes them backward? The girl leaned in slightly. I'd say, you were made by the most merciful. You don't need to perform for the world. Walk like your mother carried you with pain. Stand like your ancestors prayed for you to rise, and never apologize for your modesty. The woman blinked. Her throat tightened. That last line struck so. Maybe someday, she said, the world will see the hijab not as hiding, but as holding. Holding on to something sacred, something untouched. A final question followed, quiet and pointed. Do you believe you're freer than I am? The girl shook her head. I don't need to be freer than anyone. I just want to be free in the eyes of God. No applause came at first, just reverent stillness. And then, quietly, someone began to clap. Then another, then more, until the hall was filled with the sound, not of approval, but of admiration. Not just for a girl, but for a spirit clothed in conviction. The applause faded slowly, but the silence left behind carried something heavier. Reflection. Respect. The woman leaned forward again, this time not with doubt but genuine interest. I want to ask you something deeper, she said, her voice no longer skeptical but searching. In your religion, why can't women lead prayers? Why can men marry multiple women? Why does Islam seem to give men more rights? The question wasn't sharp, but it pierced like a needle. The girl didn't answer right away. She took a small breath, eyes lifting briefly as if seeking guidance from a sky only she could see. I think we often confuse equality with sameness, she said softly. True equality isn't about being identical. It's about equal value, without needing to compete. A few murmurs stirred in the crowd, but she went on. If I plant a rose and a cactus in the same soil, and then complain why one withers while the other thrives, is that fair? She looked gently at the woman. Men and women were created differently, not to compete, but to complete each other, each with strengths, each with roles. But why do only men lead prayers? Because leading prayer isn't a medal, it's a responsibility, and men are held accountable for that, both in this world and the next. But don't you want that kind of power? I already have power, the girl said with a calm smile. Just a different kind. I don't need a microphone to speak truth. I don't need to stand at the front to connect with God. But don't men have more privileges? No, she said, they have more obligations. Islam doesn't give men 4 wives as a reward. It gives them 4 times the duty, 4 times the responsibility, and even then, only under strict conditions most can't meet. The woman blinked as if her understanding had been quietly turned on its head. I always thought your faith restricted you. My faith sets me free. It doesn't tell me I can't lead. It tells me I lead in different ways. At home, in hearts, in the womb, where men will never lead. But what about inheritance laws? The woman asked. Isn't it unfair that women get less? The girl nodded. That's only in some cases. But do you know what's different? A woman's money in Islam is completely hers. She doesn't owe a single coin to her husband, her father, or her brother. Meanwhile, men are required to provide. No excuses. The hall fell into a deep, meaningful silence once more. The child's voice, small but mighty, had cracked open something in every listener. Not just ideas, but hearts. She continued, her voice composed yet unwavering. Inheritance in Islam isn't about preference. It's about responsibility. If I'm not obligated to spend a single coin, but my brother is bound by duty to provide for his family, is it really unfair that he receives a bit more? She let the silence linger. Across from her, the woman was no longer debating. She was digesting, absorbing. You speak with such clarity, she said softly. Where did you learn all this? A faint smile tugged at the girl's lips. From the Quran, from the wisdom in my mother's eyes, from the way my grandmother held her head high, even when life bent her spine low. And you truly believe that Islam honors women? I believe, the girl replied, her voice slightly trembling, that Islam was the first voice to cry out dignity for women, while the world was still burying its daughters alive. She paused. Islam made me valuable long before I could speak, cook, or marry. It made me sacred simply because I exist. The older woman looked down at the notes in her lap. The audience wasn't just watching a conversation. They were witnessing a shift, something invisible, but undeniable. You said earlier, the woman whispered, that you're more than a face. The child nodded. I am a mind, a heart, a servant of God, and if someone claims my faith oppresses me, they haven't seen me here, sitting in front of you, answering without fear, holding my voice like a sword. She looked toward the crowd. My Islam doesn't need defense. It needs to be seen without distortion. The woman lifted her gaze, gentler now. And what would you say to women around the world, especially those caught between culture and faith? The girl closed her eyes briefly, then opened them slowly. I'd say, don't let the world measure your worth. Don't let magazines define your beauty. Don't let the noise of the world drown your... The girl didn't answer immediately. She looked at her hands, then back up. Her gaze was calm, radiant. Then why do the strongest people still kneel in prayer? Why do billionaires feel empty? Why do scientists cry at sunsets? Why do mothers whisper to the sky when their babies sleep? She leaned forward. Because we are more than chemicals and cells. We are made of longing. And Islam? The woman asked. You really believe Islam answers that longing? I didn't choose Islam because I was born into it, the girl replied. I chose it because every time I doubted, it gave me peace. When I questioned, it gave me answers. When I feared, it gave me courage. But there are so many religions, the woman said. So many claims to truth. How are you so sure this one is right? The girl smiled. Truth doesn't shout, it whispers. And when I read the Quran, it doesn't beg for my belief. It invites me to reflect. It doesn't ask me to worship a man or a statue or a feeling. It calls me to the one who created all of them. The woman now rested her chin in her hand. This wasn't a debate anymore. This was witnessing. Islam tells me, the girl continued, that I was created with purpose, that life isn't a coincidence, that my breath is a trust, my time a responsibility, my body my own, and that one day I will return to the one who gave me all of it. She paused, and that, she whispered, is not superstition. That is surrender. For a long moment no one moved. Then the woman spoke again, her voice fragile. But you're just a child. How do you know all this? Don't you ever doubt? The girl smiled, sadness and wisdom woven in her face. I do doubt. I have. I still do. But I turn my doubts into dua. I ask, and he answers. Sometimes with signs, sometimes with silence. But even his silence feels like safety. There were tears now, many eyes glistening. The girl looked back at her once more. You asked if faith and science can live together. I believe faith is the light that guides us through the lab without arrogance. That humbles the heart, even when the mind is brilliant. A pause. Science gave us airplanes. Faith gave us direction. Science gave us medicine. Faith gave us healing. Science gave us knowledge. Faith gave that knowledge meaning. And with that, the lights above her seemed warmer, softer. She wasn't defending anymore. She was witnessing. A truth beyond formulas and facts. A world beyond wires. A presence beyond sight. The air in the hall had shifted. Not tense now, but open, curious. And then, with reverence, the next question came. Slowly, almost with regret. Why do you think the West? She sees Islam as dangerous, backwards, oppressive to women. Why are so many people afraid of your religion? The words came softly, but their weight was undeniable. The girl paused. Her small fingers grazed the edge of her dress. Then, with calm certainty, she looked up. Because people fear what they don't understand. The room stilled, leaning into the silence. If someone only ever saw thunderstorms, she continued, they'd believe the sky was violent. But if no one showed them a sunrise, how would they ever know the sky brings light? She adjusted in her seat. Islam is not what the world sees on TV. It's not men with guns shouting words they don't live by. It's not women weeping in veils or buildings crumbling. Islam is not fear. It's peace. It's prayer. It's a mother crying in the last third of the night, begging God to protect her children. The woman said nothing, only nodded, as if the girl's words were loosening bricks from walls she didn't know she'd built. Do you know what the word Islam means? The girl asked. There was no reply. It means surrender. But not to people, not to power, to the one who gave me breath. And from that surrender comes peace. That is the root of our faith. She scanned the room, eyes steady. But when people only see us through war zones, headlines and scowling faces, they never meet the little girl praying for her teacher. They never see the father waking his son for dawn prayer with a kiss, or the shopkeeper closing his store to feed the poor during Ramadan. She paused. They see bombs. We see blessings. The woman leaned in again. But what about the rules? The restrictions? People say Islam controls every part of life. The girl smiled. Yes, because every part of life matters. Islam teaches us how to eat, sleep, speak, and treat others. Not to limit us, but to purify us. Her voice grew firmer. The world says, do what you feel. But feelings change. Islam says, do what's right, even when it's hard. That's real freedom. The woman furrowed her brow. So, you don't think your religion is harsh? Harsh? The girl repeated. It tells me not to lie, not to hurt, not to steal. It tells me to guard my eyes, my tongue, my pride. It teaches me to forgive, even when I'm right. That's not harsh. That's healing. She leaned forward. Islam doesn't chain me. It frees me from the chains, T. A pause. Science gave us airplanes. Faith gave us direction. Science gave us medicine. Faith gave us healing. Science gave us knowledge. Faith gave that knowledge meaning. And with that, the lights above her seemed warmer, softer. She wasn't defending anymore. She was witnessing. A truth beyond formulas and facts. A world beyond wires. A presence beyond sight. The air in the hall had shifted. Not tense now, but open, curious. And then, with reverence, the next question came, slowly, almost with regret. Why do you think the West? She sees Islam as dangerous, backwards, oppressive to women. Why are so many people afraid of your religion? The words came softly, but their weight was undeniable. The girl paused. Her small fingers grazed the edge of her dress. Then, with calm certainty, she looked up. Because people fear what they don't understand. The room stilled, leaning into the silence. If someone only ever saw thunderstorms, she continued, they'd believe the sky was violent. But if no one showed them a sunrise, how would they ever know the sky brings light? She adjusted in her seat. Islam is not what the world sees on TV. It's not men with guns shouting words they don't live by. It's not women weeping in veils or buildings crumbling. Islam is not fear. It's peace. It's prayer. It's a mother crying in the last third of the night, begging God to protect her children. The woman said nothing, only nodded, as if the girl's words were loosening bricks from walls she didn't know she'd built. Do you know what the word Islam means? The girl asked. There was no reply. It means surrender, but not to people, not to power, to the one who gave me breath. And from that surrender comes peace. That is the root of our faith. She scanned the room, eyes steady. But when people only see us through war zones, headlines, and scowling faces, they never meet the little girl praying for her teacher. They never see the father waking his son for dawn prayer with a kiss, or the shopkeeper closing his store to feed the poor during Ramadan. She paused. They see bombs. We see blessings. The woman leaned in again. But what about the rules? The restrictions? People say Islam controls every part of life. The girl smiled. Yes, because every part of life matters. Islam teaches us how to eat, sleep, speak, and treat others, not to limit us, but to purify us. Her voice grew firmer. The world says, do what you feel, but feelings change. Islam says, do what's right, even when it's hard. That's real freedom. The woman furrowed her brow. So, you don't think your religion is harsh? Harsh? The girl repeated. It tells me not to lie, not to hurt, not to steal. It tells me to guard my eyes, my tongue, my pride. It teaches me to forgive, even when I'm right. That's not harsh. That's healing. She leaned forward. Islam doesn't chain me. It frees me from the chains the world has normalized. The woman hesitated. But what about the violence? The extremists? The radicals? Surely you've heard those stories. The girl nodded, her face somber. I have, and I hate them more than you do, because they use my religion as a shield for their cruelty. But their Islam is not mine. Her voice strengthened. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, never harmed a woman, never raised his hand in arrogance, never took revenge for himself. He forgave enemies, wept for orphans, stood when his daughter entered the room. She looked the woman in the eye. If you want to understand Islam, start with him. The silence that followed was sacred, reverent. The woman lowered her gaze as if something inside her was shifting. You said Islam is peace, she whispered, but how do you live with people hating you? For your scarf, your name, your prayer. The girl's smile was soft. I remember what the Prophet did when people threw stones at him. He didn't curse them. He prayed for them. He said, maybe their children will believe. And they did. The woman's throat tightened. She looked at the girl, not as an opponent now, but something else. Maybe a mirror. I've been stared at in stores, whispered about, laughed at. A boy once pointed and said, look, a terrorist. I cried that night. Her voice didn't shake, but my father told me, they see with fear because they don't see with knowledge. Your job is to be a walking truth. She paused. So I walk. in hijab, in hope, in silence sometimes, but never in shame. Someone in the audience wiped away a tear. Islam didn't make me silent. It gave me a voice that doesn't need to scream. The woman sat very still, her notes forgotten, her questions replaced by echoes. "You're teaching me things," she said quietly. "Things I didn't know I needed to learn." The girl didn't reply. She just smiled. Sometimes that's louder than words. The air in the room had changed. The debate had softened into something more tender. It was no longer about who was right, but about what was true. The woman's voice grew smaller as, "That's what faith does," the girl replied. "It connects you to what's eternal, so you're not shaken by what's temporary." The woman looked down. "I've searched, in books, in travel, in love, but something's still missing." The girl didn't answer immediately. "Maybe," she said gently, "you're not missing something. Maybe you're missing someone." The woman blinked. "Someone?" The girl nodded. "The one who made you, who never left you, who's been waiting for even the smallest turn, so he can run to you with open arms." Silence. Real silence. And then the girl whispered one final truth. "I think the heart knows God before the mind does. That's why when we cry, we look up, even if we don't believe." The woman placed her hand on the table, not as a gesture, but a surrender. "I don't know if I believe," she said, "but I think I want to." The girl reached out, not to touch, but to reassure. "Then he's already near, closer than your veins." No one spoke, because something holy had entered the room. Not noise, not applause, but clarity, a bridge, a choice, a sacred silence waiting to be crossed. The monasteries echoed with silence, their walls hushed like forgotten prayers in abandoned churches. But nothing ever stayed. It all slipped away, like sand through trembling fingers. Then the girl spoke, softly, deliberately, as if choosing each word with reverence. "Maybe it was never meant to stay," she said, "because nothing else can fill the space that God carved for himself." The woman looked down, her voice quieter now, as if carrying the weight of something ancient. "But there's a part of me that resists. Even now, I feel this truth pressing against my chest. And still, I hesitate." The girl met her with gentleness, no judgment in her eyes. "Because truth," she said, "requires surrender. And surrender demands the death of ego." She paused, her voice steady. "Accepting Islam isn't just saying, 'I believe in God.' It's saying, 'I am no longer the God of my own life.' And that is terrifying." The woman gave a slow nod. "You're right," she whispered. "I've built a whole identity, a voice, a worldview. I've spoken boldly about freedom, about choice, about not needing religion. And now, I find myself listening to a 10-year-old girl saying everything my soul always knew." She let out a laugh, but it wasn't joy. It was pain. "Is that what pride is?" she whispered. "Knowing the truth, but refusing to kneel?" The girl looked at her with kindness. "I have pride too," she admitted. "Sometimes I think I can do it all alone, that I know better. But then Allah humbles me. A sickness, a loss, a moment that reminds me I'm not in control." She leaned forward slightly as if letting her heart speak through her voice. "And I think he does that, because he loves us." The woman looked up. "He loves us? By humbling us?" The girl nodded. "Yes, because he knows what arrogance does. It blinds the heart. It whispers, 'You are enough without your maker.' But no one is." The woman leaned back, inhaling deeply. "Sometimes," she said, "I feel like I'm on the edge of something, but I'm afraid to fall." The girl smiled. Maybe you're not falling, she whispered. Maybe you're finally learning how to fly. Silence embraced them, deep and sacred, until the woman chuckled, this time softly. You really believe this, don't you? She asked. With every cell in my body, the girl replied. The woman's voice grew thoughtful. Do you ever fear what you might lose? Because you believe? The girl nodded. Yes, friends, opportunities, even safety. But I fear more what I'd lose without belief. Myself. The words settled into the room like quiet thunder. The woman sat still, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. I envy you, she said. You have nothing to prove, and yet you've already won. The girl shook her head gently. I haven't won, she said. I'm still walking, but I know which direction I'm facing. A long pause followed. Then the woman spoke, her voice low and sincere. What if I told you? I believe in God. I believe in His oneness. I believe Muhammad is His messenger. But I'm still not ready to say the words. The girl didn't flinch. Her voice remained calm, her face peaceful. Then your heart has already whispered them, she said. Your lips will catch up. But what if I change my mind tomorrow? Then you're human, the girl replied gently. But Allah is not impulsive. He doesn't love in phases. His love is forever. Another breath passed before the woman spoke again. When I was younger, she said, I used to look at Muslim women and feel sorry for them. I thought they were silent, trapped. But after this conversation, I think I've been the one living in a cage. Not a cage, the girl said. Just a room without windows. You've been near the door all along. You just never opened it. And Islam is the door? No, the girl whispered. Islam is the sky outside it. The woman smiled then, truly smiled. Her eyes weren't filled with tears now, but with Lee.